Hey everyone, welcome back to BookTube Iris. Today I'm going to go through all the books I read in the second half of January and all of February, and also kind of go through my TBR for March. I read a lot of books in January and I mentioned a lot of them in my last BookTube video. So the last book I mentioned was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This is so good, you should absolutely pick it up if you haven't already. But let's talk about like the new news. I've been trying really hard to read Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo for a while now. I'm like pretty much halfway through and I took a pause to read a different book, which is a lot more lighthearted, and then I ended up reading a bunch more books and I just have not gotten back to reading this. This book is really dark and I was actually in this place of doing a lot better in terms of my mental health, and I realized that consuming media that is full of icky feelings makes me feel icky. So I kind of put this on hiatus and I don't know when I'll be able to get back to reading it. I feel like I should read it in March though. Much like I got halfway through The Bell Jar and I haven't finished the second half because I literally paused when she was doing something I cannot talk about on YouTube. But yeah, I read the first half of this like in the past month and a half and I just like haven't continued reading it. So the books I actually read in the meantime of not reading that: A Lady's Guide to Fortune Hunting. I actually read this last year, so this was a reread for me, and I knew I just needed to read like a rom-com after getting halfway through Ninth House. I was like, I can't do this. I decided to reread this and I love this book. Like, it's just like a nice little rom-com, you know, makes me like kick my feet. It's Regency era and our protagonist is basically just like trying to find a rich husband, and it's so good. I know that Sophie Irwin has another book coming out this year and I'm really excited to read it. It's kind of similar Regency era type thing, I think. I'm really looking forward to that release, and I will say one thing about this book that I was stumbling over a little bit is that I feel like she takes so many character names from Jane Austen books, and that's a little bit, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's like peak literature, but it's very amusing and it's fun and it's romantic. After that, I read The Heist by Janet Ivanovich and Lee Goldberg. This is a book I just got in like a used bookstore. I was with some of my friends and one of them was like, I know that author, she's a family friend. And so I was like, okay, I'll just get the book. The premise is like international con man, ex-FBI agent, taking down a corrupt investment banker. And I would say this is like a 3 out of 5 stars. I feel like it was entertaining enough, but I don't think the romance was fleshed out because that was like kind of a part of it. It didn't really feel like the romance was built up over time. It just felt like there were these random points of tension. And then also Special Agent Kate O'Hare, our FBI agent, is like such a cop. And she's so like, I need to follow the rules, but oh, this would be such a great way to like not have to follow the rules. And she's like obsessed with having her gun. And you know, that just kind of rubs me the wrong way. Not really a character that I liked very much. I know this is like a whole series, like there are a ton of different books with these characters. I thought it was fine, but like, I don't know. I think one of the things I enjoyed about this was some of the writing was so funny in sort of a laughing at it way, like like going on about her like flat stomach and like she drinks beer though and eats lots of food. Isn't she so different? Like it was pretty laughable, but I don't think it was taking itself seriously. I think that's kind of part of the point of a book like this. So like, I'm not like judging the book for being like that, but like I was kind of laughing at it at a point and I could see how that could actually be off-putting for other people. So that's that book. Then I needed to read something good. So then I read The Tombs of Atuan from Ursula K. Le Guin. This is the second book in the Earthsea series. Earthsea cycle. And I was really worried when I started this book because I literally read the first book. I read A Wizard of Earthsea January of 2022. It was the first book I read when I became a reader. Like, it was the first book. I was really worried about having waited an entire year to read the second book, and it actually turned out to be really great because we follow like a completely different protagonist for the first part of this book, and then she kind of like joins up with the protagonist from the first book. I think it just worked perfectly with like my timing of having left that story behind. Like, it just felt like the right amount of time had passed between the two books in actuality and me in real life. I thought that was really special and I loved this book. It was so good. I love Ursula K. Le Guin. I will go on and on about her. She is so amazing. And she didn't actually intend for Earthsea to be more than one book. She actually like wrote the first one, and then she wrote A Left Hand of Darkness, which is another book I read that I really love. And then she came back and she wrote the second one, and like I read the books like in that order. It all just felt very in alignment. But I would say a main theme of this book is agency, and it's just, oh my god, it's It's so good. Like, I think I like this even more than I liked the first book. I highly recommend this series if you haven't read it yet. It's just amazing YA fantasy. Definitely harder to get into just because the writing is like, it's literature. It's not like a juicy little novel like the ones I'm about to talk about, but I mean, this book is just so fucking good. After I read that book, I was just like, okay, I just need something easy and digestible. So I like looked on TikTok a little while to try to find some like book recommendations, and I ended up reading The Bridge Kingdom. So I read The Bridge Kingdom, The Traitor Queen, and The Inadequate Heir by Danielle L. Jensen, and I read them all on my Kindle. These are like 500-page books, and they're basically like realistic fantasy with like a lot of political intrigue and then like enemies to lovers, romance, fight scenes, all that business. And I really like these books, honestly. Like, I just ate them up. They were like so good to me. Like, the first 2 books follow the characters Lara and Aaron, and it has like their whole adventure, and then the third book follows a different set of characters that we meet in the second book. In the third book, it actually overlaps in terms of like the events, so we're getting like a different expanded view on all of the events that happened in the second book, which I just loved so much. And I think the romance in the third book is super good. It's sort of like a star-crossed lovers romance, and I just thought it was so good. Like, I loved it so much. I will say these books are a little spicy, as everybody likes to call it. I don't personally really seek that out in my reading. Actually, the reason I read the first book was because I saw a bunch of people say, no, it's really not that spicy. There was like 1 or 2 scenes, so I was like, I can handle that. And sure enough, there's like 1 or 2 scenes that are spicy, but the rest of the book is just like a normal book. You know, I think in a sense that's like pretty realistic. So they're definitely like adult books. I would say the third book has like a lot more spicy stuff in it than the first 2, but I still just like events of it like even more, just because I loved the expanded view on all the stuff that I already knew happened. Like, it was so good, and it just like added a level of understanding to everything that happened. So like, I would recommend this to people who like ACOTAR. Probably, I haven't read those books. I feel like the fandom might overlap a little bit. Maybe not even ACOTAR. Anybody who really likes that like realistic fantasy with like political intrigue and romance, I feel like would like these. I really enjoyed them, and I ate them up, and I know there's another book coming, and I'm excited for it. And I would say the third book was my favorite out of all of them. Okay, now let me do a little book haul and talk about kind of what I'm reading in March. I don't actually tend to plan out the books I want to read, because I would rather like figure out what kind of mood I'm in, like when I'm starting a book. So I'm going to show you books I bought recently, but I know some of them I'm not going to read in March. First book I bought recently was the special edition of The Secret Garden, which is a story which I know the first half of the story like super well, but the second half is kind of a mystery to me, so I'm excited to read this. I visited my college campus like a week ago, and I had seen this book in there like for the past like 3 years, like when I was in college too. And this time I specifically went to the bookstore because I was like, I'm gonna get a book to remember this visit, because it was such a nice visit. And I saw this book again, and I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna get it because I've seen it every time, and I thought it was so pretty every time. I'm really excited to actually read this, but I don't think I'm gonna be reading this in March. Another book I got recently is My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I'm about 20 pages into this. I get so excited about new books that I end up reading like 20 pages and then like being like, no, I have to fixate on a book and fully read it. So I'm kind of in that mode right now where I'm reading a different book. I'm really excited about this because like it's been hyped a lot. You know, I'm a little 20-something living in New York City. Like, there are things to relate to. And I'm actually pretty pleased by this because the protagonist is super pessimistic and cynical. And so like the voice of the book is quite cynical, and I actually enjoy the degree of separation that I have between myself and the main character because of that. Like, I am not pessimistic. I'm like an extremely optimistic person, so I'm able to separate myself from the story that's happening. Something that was a bit challenging for me when I was reading The Bell Jar. But I think I might read the rest of this in March, but that's also still to be determined. And then finally, from that same shopping trip, I got The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. I did not realize that this was a book. I remember watching the animated movie of this when I was a kid, and it was heart-wrenching. Like, it's such an intense story, and I do not think I'm gonna be ready to read this in March. Like I said, like, I can't read heavy shit right now. I spotted this on the bookshelf and I was like, no way. And then I picked it up and I read the first couple sentences and I was like, wow, that really reminds me of like Le Guin's writing. So I was like, okay, I'm getting the book. Like, this is gonna be really good. And then I realized a couple of hours after I actually bought it that the first quote on the back is from Ursula K. Le Guin. So I'm really excited to read this when I get around to it, and I'm actually gonna rewatch the movie before I do that because that's the story I have in my mind's eye, and I wanna like let myself re-experience that before I even get to reading the book. There are certain books where I actually I'm fine with watching the movie first. For example, Pride and Prejudice. I watched the 2005 Pride and Prejudice masterpiece before I read the book, and it made me enjoy the book so much more. And that feels quite similar to the book I'm reading right now for March, which is The Hobbit. I've watched the movies to this story, so I already know the story. This is supposed to be like a children's book. It definitely feels like the voice of the narrator is like telling a story to a child. I think the writing is really good and humorous, and I like all the sort of different perspectives you get to see because there's sort of an omniscient narrator. But yeah, I'm halfway through this. I will be finishing the rest of it, and I think I'm gonna be reading a lot of books in March on my Kindle just because I feel like I really get sucked in when I'm looking at this thing. I just saw that Ninth House got added to Kindle Unlimited, and I'm kind of considering reading the second half of this book on my Kindle, which feels a little blasphemous, but it might be the only way I'm able to finish the book. So I might just need to accept that, even though I have the beautiful paper right here. I have a Kindle Paperwhite, so I really just enjoy being able to read in the dark, or just not having to have a reading light on is super nice. And it feels like fun screen time, but not yucky social media screen time. So I'm a big proponent of this device, and I'm really glad I bought it. Comment your recent reads, comment if you've read anything that I've read, comment what you're planning to read. I want to hear all about it. I have a highlight on my Instagram showing you all of the books that I've read this year, and in February I reached my goal of reading 10 books for the entire year, and now I'm over my goal. I've read 11. This has been me. I adore you, and I will see you in the next one.
But tonight, no, I should go before you.